What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Bootleg Football Podcast. I'm your host, Brett Coleman, here with my wonderful co-host, EJ Snyder, and we are deep in the home stretch. The playoff picture is as close as ever. There's ties at the number one seed, technically in both conferences. We got a month to go in the regular season. Anything can happen over this next 4-game stretch here. And quite honestly, I have no idea who's going to come out on top in either conference because both of them are just a round robin of destruction at this point. But hell of a week 14 to talk about. We'll talk about week 15 as well coming up here. See, it starts Thursday with Chargers-Chiefs, one of the most important games of the week. So huge show. But before we get into everything, EJ, buddy, how you doing? And what are you drinking tonight?
I'm good. I'm staying warm, which is important because it's gotten cold up here. We are in wintertime. We are in deep playoff football time. We are in ice on the windshield time. Started up the pellet stove tonight for the first time. That kind of time. So I'm good. I'm staying warm. But it is the spirit of giving for the holiday season, and I saw this at the store, and I thought it looked pretty cool, and I looked it up, and I decided it was a good idea. This is Rock On, and it is a crafted lager, and it is a collaboration to support musicians who have been hurt during the pandemic, because obviously musicians have not been able to be out at bars and touring and all that. So portions of the proceeds from this beer go to help support musicians and crews who've been put out of work due to COVID. It's called Sweet Relief, is the relief fund, and Crosby Hops is making the beer itself. I have not had it. Crucible Brewing did the actual brewing. So I thought, hey, here's a good way to give back. Try a new beer. It is 16 ounces, 1 pint, and it's 5.2 by volume. So shouldn't have quite as many hot takes as we maybe had at the end of last show. But it felt like a good thing to do. So I'm happy to bring it on the pod. What do you have?
I'm actually kind of going back to, I did a few shows ago, this Basil Hayden Dark Rye, which is like not super expensive or anything like that. It's a, pretty affordable bottle, but it's just super interesting. It's rye, also blended with Canadian whiskey and port. And I swear to God, it tastes like a Manhattan, but one that I don't have to mix myself. So I got that over a big rock tonight. So I will be letting the takes fly, probably 2 hours into recording. Before we get into news and notes and 3-Up and everything like that, I do want to thank all the folks like Billy and Jared who joined on to become patrons this week over on the Bootleg Patreon. We really appreciate the support. Love that you guys are kind of believing in us and our work. Remember, if you are a patron, or at least if you just joined to be a patron, you get merch discounts as one of the benefits of that, as well as a patron-only roundtable for the Ring of Honor and Hall of Fame level. That's going to be on January 8th, since that's the only Saturday we could find not impacted by holiday stuff. So January 8th, probably about noonish Pacific time zone. That's about what we're thinking here. So, the last one, it was just us and Consti. Consti was the only one that could make it. So he had, us by himself for like an hour and a half just doing Q&A and chit-chat and all that kind of stuff. So we'll see how many people show up for this one. And, it's an AMA. Fire away. Whatever you guys want to ask, whatever you guys want to talk about, we're there for you. So, again, that'll be January 8th if you're in either of those two top layers of the Patreon. And why don't we get to news and notes? EJ, I'll let you take it away here.
Yeah, so I was doing the non-fun part of this job, which was digging through emails in the Bootleg Gmail account. And one of the cool things that was in there is a year-end summary from YouTube. And one of the stats on there caught my eye. Actually, many of the stats on there caught my eye. But the one that caught my eye is, as they sent that thing out like a week ago, you all had consumed 18.9 million minutes of us on YouTube. So by the time we're at year end, I'm real confident in saying all of you sickos out there are going to have sucked up 19 million minutes of bootleg on YouTube.
I mean, that's like 3 shows, right?
Yeah, and somebody was like,
go,
well, to be fair, your shows are really long. And I was like, yeah, they are. And people listen longer than they do typically, which I also think is a huge achievement. But yeah, just a staggering amount of support. So thank you very much. More staggering stats. This one came up last Sunday. I wasn't aware, but Cam Jordan, defensive end for the Saints, has started every game from his rookie year until last Sunday. He was on the COVID reserve list. He's fine. That is 172 straight games as a field player. We're not talking about a punter, kicker, some reserve quarterback that doesn't play very much. Like, Cam Jordan's been out there doing it in all of those games. It's the longest active streak of any position player in the NFL. And the thing that really just twists my knickers about this one, 84.9% of the snaps in those games he played. Of the snaps he was eligible
It's absurd.
on defense, he played almost 85% of the snaps in 172 straight games in the NFL. That's ridiculous. It shouldn't even be possible. And he could have played last Sunday if it hadn't been for the COVID designation. That's just GOAT stuff. That's not many people even come close to that. So huge shout out to Cam Jordan for that. And then we have a not so great follow-up. We talked about the Giants offense being really terrible last week. And our good buddy Danny Kelly posted a tweet and said, here's a current list of all the Giants players that have scored a touchdown in the last month. Chris Myarick, Andrew Thomas, who is a tackle, and Elijah Penny. And then Saquon had to come into the picture last Sunday and screw it all up. So now there's 4 Giants players who've scored in the last month. That's not a sampling. That's all of them. That's everybody on the Giants roster that scored in the last month. And one of them is an offensive tackle. So when we say the Giants
Saquon
offense,
was like a backdoor cover there. It's like a receiving touchdown in like the last week that you could do it. I mean, but at the time this tweet was posted, that was one of the most bleak runs of offense in the NFL. And like, I've seen some bad ones. That was bleak. We can talk about, Danny Dimes being hurt. Hopefully he recovers soon. I know they're still kind of running tests on the spine injury. I don't know if he's playing this week. It sounds like he probably won't, and for his safety, he probably shouldn't. But even beyond that, like even playing with a backup quarterback, to be that bereft of production across your entire offense, despite all of the money and all of the draft picks they've invested, like that's almost inexcusable.
And yet, there are solid rumors coming out that they are going to bring Joe Judge back. Gettleman is almost certainly gone, but there is this undercurrent of we're going to keep Joe Judge. And there's been whispers that Meyer thinks that he's found his Bill Parcells, his Belichick, and I'm like, okay. The only thing that Belichick was really sad about when Judge left was that he didn't end up in the AFC East.
I mean, they're trying to make Gettleman out to be a scapegoat, and don't get me wrong, Gettleman had plenty of mistakes. But it's not like the roster has no talent. Like there's some dudes there that even now we objectively like. Like Kenny Golladay isn't just like a bad football player now. Mm-hmm. He's dealt with injuries and he hasn't been as good with the Giants as I believe he was with Matt Stafford with the Lions. But like it's the gap isn't all about Dave Gettleman. There's been some very troubling coaching issues here. And at least for me, when I look at the state of the roster, when I look at the state of the coaching staff, when I look at the future of the organization, because you and I are not convinced that Daniel Jones is the guy here, why not just completely start fresh? Like, what's the motivation to not complete? Like, why kind of string it out and you're bringing in a GM that might end up having to fire Joe Judge next year anyway if they continue to be bad, which this franchise has been bottom of the bottom of the bottom of the barrel for 5 straight years now. Like, why only kind of do half measures here? Why not just wipe the slate completely clean and, go after a candidate that you really like, whether it's Nathaniel Hackett, whether it's, people seem to like Brian Dable again this week. All of a sudden, whoever you want to throw out there as a name, I don't even care. I don't understand this half measure stuff here because I feel like Dave Gettleman has things that are his fault. Joe Judge has things that are his fault. Why only get rid of one?
Yeah, things like Joe Judge coming out this week and again saying, well, players are still learning how to practice.
It's week 14
of your second year.
What the hell?
Like, what do you mean they're still learning how to practice? That's like second week of training camp. And like, yeah, I understand there's a ton of roster turnover on NFL teams every year. And it is a new team every year. I don't think we as fans appreciate that enough, that each iteration, yes, has a small core that's carried over, but the roster movement is somewhere between 40 and 60% on most rosters. But to say that professional football players are still learning how to practice in your system 2/3 of the way through your second year, I'm not seeing the keep light flashing at that point. I'm saying, really? Okay, well, that's nice. Again, we're going to bring in a general manager. We're going to let them be in the selection process for a coach that they agree with, so we get that very important mesh between GM and coach where they're on the same page, and then we're going to move forward. And we know that's going to take a little while. The talent's there. It needs to be developed, but it's not a full, 2.5 year rebuild. Like, Gettleman did not leave, will not have left the cupboard completely bare. But the Joe Judge, I don't want to call it love, the Joe Judge vote of confidence coming out of the Giants has me very confused.
I just, in the modern NFL, I've seen organizations not afraid to just realize something after 1 and 2 years and say, you know what, this isn't working, let's go in a different direction. Like, Jacksonville may very well make a move with Urban Meyer after 1 year. I can't remember his name, Cardinals coach that only lasted a year.
Yep.
Name escapes me, but they
ultimately
made the right call.
Last 1 year.
Rosen was a top 10 pick and lasted a year, but the Cardinals were like, you know what? We've seen 16 games of this. It's not working, and we don't think it's going to work. Let's go get Kyler Murray and Cliff Kingsbury. And now they're contending for the top seed in the NFC. Like, sometimes it becomes very plainly evident that shit ain't working, and you need to start over. And the Mara's insistence on half measures will not do them any good. To get to something a little bit more positive, let's talk about 3 up. Bills and Bucs, which started out being a blowout, ended up being a great game towards the end. Very much a tale of two halves, which I feel like the Bucs tend to be involved in a lot of games that are the tale of two halves, both for and against them. This game was fascinating to me for a variety of reasons. Some good, some bad for both teams. The good is I think that the Bills showed that even without a run game, it's still possible for them to move the ball. Not that they can't run the ball. Like, they popped a few good runs in the second half, both with Josh Allen and with Singletary. Like, they were kind of RPO heavy and they were getting, pull keys. So they pulled it and they threw more than they ran because the RPO split. We saw the same thing happen with Philly. I'm not going to get too deep into that. But they showed that even with consistently getting the keys to just throw the ball and throw the ball and throw the ball, they still put up, 20, 24, 27 points in this game. They didn't have a bad performance. They just had an inconsistent performance because in the first half, they were really struggling to get going. They were struggling to sustain drives. And then in the second half, they were really turning it on. Josh Allen heated up. Again, they popped a couple big runs that at least gave some sort of semblance of balance. They were more efficient in the red zone, hit a really nice seam ball down there. Josh scored on like a counter bash call, which really kind of opened things up for them at the start of the second half. So I feel like the Bills showed that the offense isn't completely broken and they could still make it work. On the other end of the spectrum, the Bucs secondary is kind of a snake in the grass, where the Bills literally went into this game and said, we're not going to give any of our running backs more than like 4 carries because it's probably on average not going to work out for us. We're going to throw and we're going to throw and we're going to throw. And we don't think that you can match up with our receivers. And we don't think that you're really going to punish us that much for doing that. And in the first half, again, it kind of worked. But as the game went on and Allen heated up, their DBs were not good enough to cover Stephon Diggs and Cole Beasley and, Davis, Gabe Davis making a crucial play on 4th and 4. Like, their DBs weren't good enough to match up with these guys. And I feel like there's been an under-the-radar storyline this season of the Bucs secondary, particularly the Bucs corners, kind of being their undoing in multiple games here. And this is just another example that if they face the wrong team in the NFC playoffs that has the receiver talent to go out there and just completely carve up their corners, I'm not sure if I like the Bucs' chances here of getting out of the AFC. Like, it's hard to win a Super Bowl when your secondary is terrible. And at least in my opinion, the Bucs secondary is a liability, to put it nicely.
This is a classic case of mating pass rush and coverage. And in the first half, Bruce Arians, I think he's been watching a lot of Miami film. And he was like, all right, bring the house. Like, they blitzed the piss out of Josh Allen in the first half.
Like 32 times, something like that. It was crazy.
They just blitzed and blitzed and blitzed. It looks like what a team would do against a rookie. But that was Bruce Arians' idea of, we're going to bring the house. We don't think they can hold up long enough. And our corners are physical. And both teams were very physical in this game. This was a physical hitting matchup. One of our Bootleg Shot of the Week nominees was the second play in the game. So both teams came out hitting. And the Bucs secondary is starting to get healthy. They're starting to get some guys back. And when the pass rush is like that, when the pass rush is voracious and making Josh Allen choose very, very quickly, they held up. They held up for 2.5 seconds, and it worked just fine. As Josh got through that and got into the second half and started to heat up and started to punish them with more QB keepers, he had over 100 yards in this game rushing, you started to see the coverage break down because the rush wasn't having the same effect. They blitzed almost as much, but the Bills made some adjustments. And let's be honest, Josh Allen put on a cape in this game at halftime. His first half, 12 of 20, 60%, 130 yards, no TDs, a pick, 3 sacks, 6.5 yards per attempt. That's a 58.3 rating. Not QBR, but passer rating. So, not great. Second half, 23 of 32, 71.9%, 175 yards, but 2 TDs, no picks, no sacks, and that ends up being 105.6 rating. Also tacked on 8 rushes, 66 yards, and a rushing TD in the second half. So Josh Allen put the Bills on his back in rushing, in passing, came out and made this a game. Again, this was not a pretty game in the first half. Didn't look like the Bills were going to compete. Ends up going to overtime, largely because of what Allen and the Bills were able to do. But you're right. Coverage in the second half looked a whole lot different when Allen was finding ways, both with RPO and straight quarterback runs, called quarterback runs, to really make them think for a second. All of a sudden, the secondary got exposed a little bit, and Buffalo started marching and scoring points.
And another aspect of this is, yes, Buffalo was scoring, but the reason why they were able to get back in the game is because the defense kept Tampa from scoring. I feel like Dane Jackson had some really nice reps, stepped up against the tight ends, playing ultra physical. It's hard for a guy at his size to, take on like Gronk and really all of their tight end core, but he did it, made a couple really nice plays. Poyer made a couple really clutch tackles short of the sticks, and they held Tampa to really only getting like 2 good drives from halftime onward, which against Tampa's admirable. And without that defensive switch being flipped, very similar to the offensive switch being flipped, this would have been like a 40-10 type game. And we probably would have put the nail in the coffin for the Bills season. They still lost, but I think their second half performance was encouraging enough to me that I think they're not quite dead yet. Because, again, they proved that even when they're just throwing and throwing and throwing, they can still put up points. And they proved that even when they're getting lit up in the first half, they can make defensive adjustments and hold a very good offense to not a whole lot of production in the second half. Kind of a too little, too late type game, obviously. But the second half, I think, was more encouraging for me than I think the first half, or for Buffalo, than I think the first half was for Tampa. And I know that's like a hot take.
I'll give you a hot take on that one.
I was really that impressed with how Buffalo was able to come back from being down that much and still taking it to OT. On the flip side, I mentioned the corner problem for Tampa. The reason why they're still a threat, though, is because, Tom Brady, MVP frontrunner, he's still great. We know that. The offensive line and Leonard Fournette are still ass kickers in a variety of ways. Mm-hmm. Like Donovan Smith is, I mean, this is easily, like not even close, his best season as a pro. Kicking ass in the run game. Like Tristan Wirfs is probably a top 3 or 4 tackle, regardless of side, in the NFL. He's a monster. Jensen's great at center. You know, both guards have been stellar this year. Like that offensive line is probably minimum top 3 in the league because you can kind of order them any way you want to. They have to be in your top 3. And when you combine that with Leonard Fournette also having a renaissance season, both as a runner and as a receiver, I mean, he's catching everything. He's like James White plus 40 pounds this year. Those two elements are still why I think they have a chance to outlast their secondary being shitty. Because as long as they can still run and still convert a hell of a lot of third downs and protect themselves from getting exposed on defense, they still have a shot. But without that offensive line and without Lenny Fournette doing his thing, I do think that Tampa would be in a lot more trouble.
For sure, and I'm not going to forget about their tight end core, which is ridiculously deep. Hall of Famer leading it off. You got Mike Evans, another Hall of Famer, outside catching all kinds of third down balls. Luke Easterling, who writes for Draft Wire at USA Today, is a huge Mike Evans fan. He posted today, I think Mike Evans averages 15.2 yards a catch for his career.
Yeah. It's insane.
For his career.
He's one of the best of his generation, easily.
So that offense is very malleable. They can do what they need to, however they need to. They want to go up on the outside, they got Evans. They want to go deep down the seam, they got Gronk. They want to pound the snot out of you. Yeah, Ryan Jensen is going to punch you in the mouth, 40, 50 times a game, and you're going to stop wanting it at some point. Ed Oliver had a lot of piss and vinegar in the beginning of this game, got into it with Brady for the second time in his career. By the end of the game, Jensen had humbled Oliver physically. Bent him over a couple times.
Yeah,
just
he tends to do that.
Yep. No, he is a tough guy. And I say that in a, not like a, paper tough guy. Like, no, Jensen is a tough guy in the middle. And he will do what he needs to dominate the person across from him. Did this week, does many weeks. So this is a team that is very difficult to stop, not to mention Tom. And of course you need to mention Tom whenever you get to the playoffs and beyond, because he has more experience there than literally anybody else in NFL history. This is a team that can be tough to stop. They may give up points, right? They're still tough against the run, but like you said, they hit the wrong team on the wrong day. They could give up a bunch of passing yards, and that could keep the game very even. I still feel like in the end, the Bucs are going to be there because they're going to be very difficult to shut down on offense because they can always just go to the next guy, go to the next thing, go to the next concept, go to the next play. Unfortunately
for Tampa, I do think that they are going to need their offense to play out of their minds to get through the NFC, because they are on track to have to go to Green Bay, which is no easy feat.
Yep.
And even then, again, based on what happens in the last month, like you're still going to have to face Arizona. You're still going to have to face the Rams. You're still going to have to face all those receivers from Dallas, most likely. Like, the receiving cores in the NFC are insane. I just worry that they don't have the horses on the back end to survive 4 shootouts in a row to get through the NFC playoffs. That's really, really hard to do. Like, I compare that to some of the defenses that also have those receiving cores. Like now that Dallas's defense is back healthy, can they win a shootout against the Cowboys? I don't know. We'll see. Maybe that week 1 showdown that we watched in Vegas of Dallas and Tampa was a little bit of a preview of something to come in January. Maybe we'll see. 3-up number 2. Speaking of NFC playoff contenders, the 49ers really, really, really needed this win over Cincinnati, and they got it. Really gutsy win. I'm still trying to figure out exactly what kind of chance I want to give them in the NFC, because they are not without issue themselves. But I will say this, their skill position group, when they're healthy, Debo, Ayuk, Kittle, throw in whatever running back you want to, whether it's Eli Mitchell, Jeff Wilson. Doesn't feel like it even matters at this point, but Mitchell's super talented. You throw that group together, that's a tough group to match up with in virtually any way. Kittle is a unicorn of a tight end. Ayuk can beat you with yak. He can beat you over the top. Debo is... how do you even describe Debo at this point? Because he's not a receiver. He's not a running back. He's an everything. He's one of the best Swiss Army knives in the league. It's a very, very tough group to deal with. And I feel like when Jimmy's on, which is not every week, but when he's on, I don't know a whole lot of defenses that can match up with all those guys, and that's why they're dangerous. Not to mention, I think the defense has also played kind of under the radar, pretty well this season. They only have like a few very, very small weaknesses, but man, when this team gets rolling, they're pretty scary.
And that's the thing that I think a lot of folks forgot about. We'll talk about the offense, or I'll talk about the offense in just a minute, but the defense, new coordinator this year, not new to the team, but new in that role. First time ever as a defensive coordinator, DeMeco Ryans. And excellent player we both followed closely when he was a player and had a ton of respect for, and we're really excited about his chances, but it's going to take a while when you change from one guy to the next. Terminology, cadence, what they're going to call, what they expect. All those things are things that you learn in stride and in season. And through the first half, they had struggles. They had breakdowns. They had games where they didn't look good. And people went, oh, man, maybe DeMeco's not the guy. It's a little early for that. Now they're starting to gel and play up to their talent level, play fast. You always hear that, right? They're thinking less and playing with more speed in the defense. The offense was kind of the same way for different reasons. Debo was there. Kittle was hurt. Ayuk was, benched, doghouse, whatever you want to call it.
Whatever that was,
he wasn't played, right? So it was just kind of Debo, and it was the Debo show. And they focused and featured Debo, right? And Debo had some amazing games, but he didn't have a ton of help. He routinely got running back help through that. Running back by committee doesn't even feel fair. Like running back by whoever feels a little bit more fair. So there were weeks where their offense fired, and there was weeks where their offense misfired and looked really toothless. And then there are just weeks that Jimmy didn't play great. And Jimmy's going to have those weeks. He's a little bit like Kirk Cousins that way. He can play up. His highs, I don't think, are as high as Kirk's. He doesn't get quite as hot. But he definitely has down weeks where he plays down or just doesn't play as well as he can. Now you're starting to see everything come together the way they envisioned it. Debo's still there. Ayuk has worked his way out of the doghouse and is scoring massively important points, some to win this game. Kittle's back healthy. Nobody's going to stay with him when he's healthy and playing well. The offensive line, we got to talk about Trent Williams. Like, I'm just gonna pound the table right here, and I'm gonna say my hot take for the week, which isn't all that hot. I think it's a lukewarm take. Trent Williams is the best football player in the NFL. Period. Any position. Don't care. Don't care. No one is playing football better than Trent Williams right now. We talked about him a lot at the beginning of the year. We talked about him kind of week on, week off. It wasn't because Trent did anything silly. It's because we kind of got tired of saying every week, oh my God, did you see Trent Williams annihilate that guy this week? Like, in the run game, he is way more agile than a guy his size should be, and he is routinely tracking down much more agile guys, defensive backs, in space, and obliterating them. Routinely. He has a 99-point-something run grade from PFF. Unheard of. Even the PFF folks are like, since we've started grading, nobody's had a grade this high. Like, this isn't normal. And just looked up a stat. He has given up 1 sack in the last 735 pass attempts. That's more than an entire season worth of pass attempts. He's given up 1 sack. So here's a guy that is elite,
I have no words for that. Ugh.
Elite as a pass protector and has the highest run grade anybody currently has ever seen. Like, Trent Williams is the best football player in the NFL right now. And he's not going to win, offensive player of the year because he's a tackle, and they don't give that award to tackles. They could and should, but they're not gonna. So anyways, when you have that many guys assembled on one side of the ball that are all healthy and all playing well, and Jimmy comes out and looks, now we've given Jimmy a lot of crap on this show, and rightfully so. When Jimmy comes out and looks like he did in the second half and he's on, like, forget it. The defense will easily hold up to that level because the offense is going to score a bunch of points. So the 49ers are getting dangerous at the right time. They struggled through the first half of the season. They looked really inconsistent, and people, including us, kind of went, is it time to write them off yet? Like, it's almost time. And now it feels like they're back, and they're clicking on all cylinders, and everybody's kind of looking at them going, ooh, wow, if all those guys are there, that's a tough out.
So I just looked it up because I'm curious. So October 10th against the Cardinals is week 9. November 7th against the Cardinals was week 9. Was the last and only sack that he's given up this season. You have to go all the way back to October 11th of 2020, more than a calendar year, to get to the last sack he gave up before that. So he went 13 months and, as you said, over 700 snaps without giving up a sack. I don't know if I've ever seen that. Like, that's not just rare air, that's like historically rare air. Like, this dude's a first ballot Hall of Famer. Slam it, like, first ballot Hall of Famer, like, slam it shut. It's over. He's arguably the best tackle of his generation. And I know that he got paid a record deal and he's, the highest paid guy and all that kind of stuff. It's not enough. It's literally not enough. The fact that Washington fucked up this bad to chase away a player of this caliber is, like, insane to me.
I wasn't going to bring that up, but yeah, it is. It's amazing to me. It's almost like people get bored with people being this good. And that's a weird thing to say, but they're just like, oh yeah, he's always going to do it. He's always done it. Yeah, I don't know. It seems like we could replace that. No, you can't. Like, there's nobody out there that you could get that is going to play better than that, or even really a semblance of that. We were talking about it before the show. I said, well, to me, it's like Walter Jones, who in my mind is one of the best offensive tackles to ever play the game. Like, and there are a lot of great ones, but Walter Jones is right there. Imagine if it was Walter Jones, but he was faster. I don't want to say more athletic, because Walter Jones was stupid athletic. But imagine if Walter Jones was faster. Like, because when you see Trent get out on the pull, like, he's tracking down DBs 10 and 15 yards down the field and just mowing them over. And those guys are supposed to be able to jitterbug away from people that are over 300 pounds. Nope. He just runs them down. And that's just a scary thought. Like, that shouldn't be possible, but that's what he's doing.
What's unfortunate for the Niners, though, and maybe this will be a little bit of a depressing 3-up this week, but their kind of Achilles heel that I feel might cost them in the playoffs, similar to how I feel like the Bucs secondary should be talked about more. Their right side of the offensive line, opposite of Trent Williams, is arguably just as much of a liability as Williams is a staple. Like, you look at Tom Compton, Daniel Brunskill at right guard, right tackle. They give up 10 pressures in this game. 10 pressures. Sam Hubbard got 7 on him. Hendrickson got a sack on him. Larry Ogunjobi got 4 pressures. Like, they were just getting absolutely destroyed. And, like, not to disparage Jimmy or anything like that, but if it's 3rd and 7 and he's got 2 turnstiles on the right side of the line, he's not mobile enough to get out of it. And you saw that in this game. Like, he's not a Lamar. He's not, like a prime Cam, obviously. He's not even, I would say, like a Mac Jones in terms of niftiness in the pocket. Because Mac, he's got some pretty nice feet, not going to lie. And he can kind of get out of some stuff that people don't give Mac enough credit for how good he is at getting out of pressure in the pocket. I just don't think he has the pocket skills or the athleticism to make up for the right side of his offensive line caving in every other 3rd down like they were against Cincy. And it almost cost them this game. Like, it flat out almost made them lose. And Cincy had some problems of their own. 2 muffed punts, gave away a couple possessions that led to points. There was the long bomb to Jamar Chase that was a touchdown until it wasn't. And, Jamar had a couple big catches in this one, but they really needed that one, and they didn't get it. You had some protection issues with Cincy themselves because they're playing with some backup offensive linemen. And yet they still almost won because they were able to take advantage of San Francisco's protection issues opposite Trent Williams. So Niners fans should be happy. They're still alive in the NFC race. They're still firmly in control of their own destiny, I should say, to get a wild card spot. But boy, if they don't kind of shore up the right side of that offensive line, and they're going up against DeMarcus Lawrence, they're going up against Micah Parsons lining up right next to each other in the first round, they're fucked. Like, they're straight up fucked.
Yeah, I don't want to put the right side of that line up against anybody really that has any talent. I have 2 words for you. Secret weapon.
What's that?
Charlie Werner.
Yeah, 6 and 7 man protections all day, baby.
Charlie Werner, right hand side, just stick him right off there, right over Compton, just like be right there, because Charlie Werner is a great blocker, tight end out of Georgia, who caught my eye at the combine as being fairly athletic, and really caught my eye on film when I was going through all the pass rushers that year in college, and I was like, man, and I kept making this note, right? This is one of those things about hand scouting. I kept making this note, like, guys struggle. He's beating tackles, but he's struggling against tight ends. Beating tackles, but he's struggling against tight ends. And I was like, man, it's a trend this year with edge rushers. Then I went back, and they were all the SEC pass rushers, and the tight end they were struggling with was Werner. And I was like, holy crap, he's draft eligible. Like, that's a guy. And then San Francisco drafted him. We celebrated on the draft live stream. That guy can block. They're gonna need to slide him. Either start him on the left side with Kittle in a double tight end formation, and then slide him to the right to either get a straight up or a chip. Because they were caving in fast, and you look at Dallas, who we're really not going to talk about sort of in specific this week. The Dallas rule of 3 is back, right? Yeah, they got Gregory, they got DeMarcus Lawrence, and they got Micah Parsons. And whoa, boy, turns out when all 3 of those guys are on the field, guess what? They're going to wreak some havoc because they're all talented. And if they go up against somebody like that, 2 out of 3 of those guys are going to be on that right side. Jimmy's going to be run for his life.
Or, God, even, God forbid it's Green Bay, and you got, Preston Smith and Kenny.
It's just... I was waiting for Kenny. Kenny's always the guy I wait for, because that guy is crazy talented.
Or, like, if Washington somehow sneaks in, like, you're going to trust John Allen? You're gonna win that one-on-one against John Allen. Okay.
Not typically.
Yeah. So overall, really entertaining game. Very winnable game for Cincy that I think they're really going to want back because, again, they are fighting for their life right now in the AFC playoff race. And they really needed this one, and the 49ers gutted it out. You know, Jimmy, to his credit, made some great plays late in the game that they really needed. Ayuk came through on the catch and run for the game-winning score. Like, 49ers earned this win. But there's also some things they got to work on if they want to take this further than just like the divisional round, because they're not a totally complete team. They're just a good team right now. And if you want to win the Super Bowl, you need to be a complete team. Rams Cardinals, a battle between two teams that theoretically are complete teams, and the Cardinals were theoretically arguably the most complete team in the league. And they got their asses kicked. I cannot say that I expected this. I mean, you got Jalen Ramsey out, Higbee out, Dante Deon out, Havenstein out, Henderson out. Like, you're missing all of these key contributors on both sides of the ball. And, I mean, they just went down to Arizona and boat raced them. Well, maybe I shouldn't say boat race, but they were firmly in control of the game. And I never really felt, even when Arizona was making that late push and they were on that last drive and, there was should you try to score now and get a field goal and then you're doing the onside? Like, I never really felt like Arizona actually legitimately had a shot to come back because they couldn't protect Kyler. Aaron Donald was in his lap all night. Vaughn was making plays. Leonard Floyd was making plays. Kyler threw a couple boneheaded interceptions. The DBs played as well as they could, sans two starters. But, Matt Stafford was dealing all night, and the Rams' front seven was completely in their bag in terms of getting pressure on Kyler. And they won with that. And it's kind of weird because the Rams are like that team this year where they lose games they're supposed to win and they win games they're supposed to lose. But they're making it work, and I think this was a firm signal that, okay, the free fall has ended. We've figured out some stuff. Stafford's getting comfortable again. Odell's getting adjusted. Cooper Kupp is still amazing. He's going to be an all-pro. We can make it work. We're still very talented. We're still the Rams. That was a game that they desperately needed, and they got it. And I am now, maybe this is dangerous to say, I am now more confident in the Rams than I was even earlier on in the year.
Ooh.
Because they were able to win that game that on paper they should have gotten completely blown out, and they still won.
Yeah, if you'd swapped these two for me, if you'd said, the Rams did how the Cardinals did and the Cardinals did how the Rams did in this particular game, I would have been like, yeah, that seems about right. That's probably chalk in this game. Turns out that, flip the script. Stafford comes out dealing, using Kupp. I want to give Sony Michel a bunch of credit. The Sony Michel trade was like, people are like, I never really got going in New England. He rushed 20 times, 80 yards, 4 yards a pop.
Steady Eddie.
Yep. Knocking out yards when they needed him, picking up first downs when he needed to. Stafford was the difference with explosive plays. He threw some absolute dimes. The ball he threw down the left sideline over Kupp's shoulder.
Oof.
That there's 10 guys in this league that can throw that ball, and Stafford can still throw it with ease. That is a play that Goff would rarely make. He'd rarely attempt it, to be fair. Like, Jared wasn't going to pull the trigger on that throw. Stafford will let it fly. And again, the Rams, you said, they win games they should have lost and lose games. Anyways, like, in the beginning of the year, they won everything. They looked really good. They were neck and neck. They were ahead of the Cardinals, even in the division race, straight up. And then they faltered, right? They got to the peak and they kind of fell off and they started losing games in bunches. And now, like you said, they had to have this game. Divisional game, so it's really worth 2. It's against the Cardinals. It's in the Cardinals' house, right? You travel to Arizona. So again, if you told me that the Rams performed like the Cardinals and the Cardinals like the Rams, I would have gone, yeah, Cardinals win that game at home, take firm control of the division. That's what we talked about in Watch List last week. But it didn't happen that way. The Rams put their foot down. Front seven played amazing. Darius on the corner. I'm really sorry about your prop bet, but Darius on the corner for the Rams played out of his mind. He played so well, and he played so well. He's a top 10 corner last year. People didn't really pay attention to it. We talked about it, but when you're opposite Jalen Ramsey, you're not going to get that much attention. But I kept saying, like, Darius is playing really well.
He's getting all these targets and nobody's getting catches. What's up with that?
I know he destroyed your prop bet. I apologize for that.
Oh,
but
killed me.
The Rams came out and said, we're going to take this. Kyler ended up running. When Zaven Collins got the onside kick, I thought, oh, no. Here we go. Like, Hail Murray 2.0. Like, tell me no. Like, but we got to say something about primetime games this year. Like, primetime games this year have been, here we are at, we're at week 14 recap. We're looking at week 15. I don't know about you, but I don't feel like there's been more than one game this year in prime time where I've been like, turn it off at halftime, sucks. Right?
Even the Bears had an interesting primetime game.
And it feels like a couple of years ago, by this point, by 3/4 of the way through the season, there's usually been like 3 or 4 stinkers where you're like, okay, I'm watching it for work.
I think like Thursday games have been, there's been some rough Thursday games, but like the Sunday night and Monday night slate in general, I feel have been very good.
And Thursday, like I would say like 3. Just again, don't quote me. I don't have the research, but I would say there's been like 2 or 3 games on Thursday night that didn't come down to a score, right? In the fourth quarter, like, or at the gun, they were 7-point games at worst. Like, there were no like, oh, they're down by 20. Yep, they're going to be down by 14 by the end of the game. Like that game, you don't even want to watch the second half. There have been so few of those in prime time. The NFL's parity in general is killing it right now. I think somebody gave the stat of 24 teams are within one game of being in the playoffs right now out of 32. Like
75% of the league.
Yeah, it's staggering. So it felt like, oh, the Rams have this one, and then it was like, wait, Cardinals are, theoretically back in this, and now you're scrambling for maybe a late Hail Mary. Cardinals self-destructed at the very end there, which was a little bit troubling to me. Like Kyler was
why
really
not spike
pissed.
it? What the fuck?
Why not spike it and just like Kyler was super frustrated, and then they get a false start and they end up going backwards, and pretty soon you're like, I don't even think Kyler can throw it that far, and Kyler can heave it. Like, they just kind of melted at the end, and that worried me just the littlest bit. Like Cardinals are still, look, great record in the NFC. One of the 3 leaders need to be talked about in the same breath with Tampa Bay and Green Bay because they're right there. They've earned that. But that little bit at the end, like, hey, you got a shot in a division game. Yeah, you're taking a heave, but you've won on them before. And you just go out with a whimper after getting the onside kick. They just kind of self-destructed, and then the game was over. And that worried me just the littlest bit. So I'm just going to put that in there. I'm not going to over-index on it. I'm just going to say, that wasn't great. That didn't feel like a well-oiled killing machine that's going to rage through the NFC playoffs right there.
Yeah, I struggle with trying to figure out where the Cardinals are at in the NFC. I don't think that they're the best team in the NFC because basically ever since Green Bay took them down with half a roster, I've said, yeah, Green Bay's the team. And just now they finally were able to, wrestle the 1 seed away from them, and I don't think Green Bay's giving it back. But I struggle to figure out, okay, relative to Tampa, relative to Dallas, relative to LA now, because the Cardinals blew them out earlier in the season. Remember that. So I can't figure out exactly where they are in the food chain. What I do know is when they play to their potential, there's very few teams that are as talented as they are. When Kyler's really rocking and rolling and he's healthy and, Hopkins is healthy and, Rondale's dynamic. I still don't feel like they get him the ball enough, but he is dynamic. Zach Ertz, I feel, has played extremely well since he came over from Philly. The offensive line is up and down, but when they have their weeks, they have their weeks. Chase Edmonds, I think, is a fantastic weapon. James Conner's been great.
Okay, all right. There it is. How many players did you name before you got to Connor?
Too many.
Like 7. Yeah, too many. I put a mea culpa on Twitter that James Conner, we talked about it in our divisional preview in the offseason. I thought James Conner was a meh signing, right? He kind of went out with a whimper in Pittsburgh. He was hurt, but I didn't feel like he brought a whole lot of dynamism. I ate crow publicly on Twitter yesterday. I said, I thought this was a mess signing. Baloney. Conner has been indispensable for the Cardinals this year. He is second in running back touchdowns in the league.
15.
Second in the league in running back touchdowns. He has been a force for them, running the ball, catching the ball. I don't know about you, but he looks niftier running the ball than he did really in the past 2 or 3 years. And he had good feet, but it was usually just kind of in the short area. And Louis Riddick talked about it on the broadcast last night. People miscast him as a power-only back. He had more than that. He looks shifty. And Riddick said another thing about he worked really hard during the offseason to prove people wrong. And it feels like it. It feels like a guy that lost a little bit of weight, added a little bit of quickness, worked on his pass catching, and is now this complete force for them that when he's in, he is not predictable. You are not sure they are running it between the tackles when Connor comes in the game, right? He has been a thing for them, and he's on a 1-year deal. He's a complete bargain. He's going to make his money, but he's been a revelation for the Cardinals, and I have to eat it on that one because I was like, James Conner, whatever. Yeah, they added him, sure, depth, blah, blah, blah. Like, I thought he was good for short yardage carries, steal a couple of touchdowns. That is where I drew the line. He's been dynamic and a force for them.
I've been really enjoying Nate Tice on Twitter this season because Nate Tice, he's a writer. He does the Athletic Football Show with Robert Mays. He's fantastic. And son of Mike Tice, if you're familiar with Mike Tice, who I love. And then he was also James Conner's assistant position coach at Pitt when he was, I think, or was he a GA or an assistant? I can't quite remember. Because he played with Russell Wilson at Wisconsin and then, was getting into the coaching game in the family business, went to Pitt, coached James Conner. And he kind of has been taking a couple victory laps this season because he's like, look, I've known since James was like a youngin' at Pitt that he could catch the ball. The problem is nobody ever let him catch the ball. And, a decade later, he's out making one-handed grabs on Monday Night Football and, proving that he is as versatile a weapon as you allow him to be. And so that's what I'm saying. Like, the Cardinals they're insanely talented. Mm-hmm. But every once in a while, particularly at home, which is also something that's weird, particularly at home, they just lay an egg. And I don't have an explanation for it. And that's why I can't figure out where to stack them in this group of like 5 teams underneath Green Bay, because I don't really know which Cardinals I'm going to get, the ones that play to their potential or the ones that inexplicably shit the bed.
Well, here's a question for you that just popped into my mind because of that. We talked about the Cardinals being road warriors 2 weeks ago, that they'd won all of their games on the road, right? That made them the best team in the road in the NFL. And then last week, we followed it up with a note and said, hey, not only have they won all their games on the road, they won them all by 10-plus points, which is staggering. First time since, I think, the 68 Cowboys is what we said, that's happened. Last night, Monday Night Football, they threw up a stat, and they said not only is that the case, but all their turnovers come at home, right? The balance of their turnovers is real bad at home and really decent on the road, which would lead you to think that's why they'd had all their success. So I pose the question, is it a good thing they lost the number 1 seed?
Because they're better on the road as a team? Wouldn't that be crazy?
I'm just saying, is that not an advantage? If you are undefeated on the road, you win all your games on the road by 10 plus points, and your turnover differential is way better away from your home stadium. Maybe it pays not to have home field advantage throughout the playoffs.
You know what's even crazier? Speaking of weird Arizona sports stats. So they lead the league in fumbles per game at 1.9. They fumble twice
I saw this
per game. Mm-hmm. When I was in Cleveland, by the way, and I'm like literally sitting with my buddy who works with the Browns, and we're watching them fumble 4 fucking times and recover all of them.
On the road.
And I'm like, there's no, like, this is going to catch up to them. No, apparently it doesn't, because even though they fumble more than any other team in the league, they are best in the league in terms of lost fumbles per game at 0.2. So they lose a fumble like once every 5 games, despite fumbling more than any other team. What?
Makes no sense.
Like, come on.
Makes no sense. Most fumbles, least lost. Like, you know,
it's like the anti-Giants. Like, I don't get it.
Now, JB said to me, he had a football coach coming up, and one of the football coach's sayings was, "It's a funny shaped ball."
Yeah.
And
that's what it comes down to.
You get stuff like that. It's, basketball, it's a round ball. Baseball, it's a round ball. Tennis, round ball. Football, it's not. It just bounces funny sometimes. And you get that you see this with different statistics, with sacks, with interceptions, with fumbles, with all kinds of stats. Like, last year, they couldn't buy a sack. This year, they have 25. It just goes up and down. And it's a funny shaped ball. And that is the ultimate it's a funny shaped ball stat for the Cardinals. We drop it on the ground more than anybody, but we lose less than anybody, so it's okay.
I don't think this is tracked, but I think they also have like the most bad snaps, because I swear to God, every single game there's like 3 or 4 bad snaps.
Yeah, there's some other teams that might dispute that, like Pittsburgh, like Kendrick Green's getting a reputation for throwing Ben Roethlisberger.
Oh, he's got moonshots.
Catch him over like, and Ben's just like, I got it. And so it overall seems like less, because again, they lose less of those, but there's some other fan bases that might go after you on the snaps bit.
Let's get to 3 down, number 1. Unfortunately, this is like a weekly topic at this point, but Urban Meyer. This has got to be a one and done. Like, I know Shad Khan doesn't listen to our show, but oh my God, Mr. Khan.
Says you.
Please do not do this to Trevor Lawrence. Do not cost this young man his career, because this dude is checked out. He does not have the personality of a winning NFL head coach. All of this stuff that he did in college that he could do in college because of the power structure that used to exist at that level and still does to a degree, but certainly less so now. Back when Urban was dominant, like, the transfer portal wasn't what it was today. And, the players virtually had zero power. It was the head coach had all the power, so he could get away with it, whatever he wanted. When I look at his quote-unquote ability to motivate at the NFL level, reports are that none of the players like him. None of the players want to play for this guy, that he's a condescending dick that nobody actually wants in the building. You got reports from Tom Pelissero posted to the actual NFL website. This is on the NFL news desk, talking about how he's, getting into arguments with Marvin Jones, who's unquestionably one of the leaders on the team. And so much so that Marvin had to leave and assistants had to convince him to come back. That he's belittling all these assistant coaches and calling them losers, which, to be fair, he disputed that. But again, I don't think Tom is running that story unless he's heard that from multiple sources. And I believe that more than I believe Urban denying it. I'll just say that. You have this is less of an issue, but the handshake with Mike Vrabel after yesterday's game where they got blown out. Vrabel was on his staff at Ohio State. Didn't even acknowledge his existence. Just blank 1,000-yard stare. Nobody fucking likes this guy. Nobody wants him there. Trevor Lawrence, who does not create drama at all, is doing his damnedest to not call him out in the media for not playing James Robinson. And then he still doesn't really give any work to James Robinson, who's arguably their best player on offense. This is a fucking disaster. It's not fair to Trevor. It's not fair to the fans. It's not fair to the assistants that, unfortunately are stuck with this guy. He is not built to be an NFL head coach. He is not built to coach in an environment where he, through archaic means, has all of the power and nobody's allowed to tell him that he's doing it wrong. He can't survive in this league. So let him go. I don't care what it costs. Let him go. He should not be here anymore.
Yeah, the question is, what would you do if you kept him? Because he's not
Fail
adding
again.
Yeah, he's not adding anything. It's a toxic work environment. None of his staff is really going to want to work for him after he called them out as losers publicly. And like Urban is the guy that now we're talking about 14 weeks of regular play and the preseason that he's had so many scandals that you forget that he hired a strength coach who was shouldn't have been hired as an NFL strength coach and had to let him go. Like at the beginning of the season.
To put it mildly.
You totally forget that, right? Because he's had the bar incident. He's had not playing his best players. He's had calling out his
OTA
coaches.
incidents that cost them a $250,000 in fines, and they're losing OTA days next season because he didn't obey the rules.
Yeah, not to mention they asked him at the podium this week, which I thought was a little bit of an unfair question, but not really given the circumstances, like, hey, why aren't you playing Andre Sisco? And he's like, oh, player we both like, by the way. Like, oh, I think his playing time's gone up a little bit. Cisco played 0 snaps on Sunday. This is just a comedy of errors, and I don't mean comedy in a funny way. It's just continuing to trip over your own feet to the point where you are hindering your team's chances to win. You are ensuring that you are going to end up damn near last place. Like, not just not competing, but like, you're going to be down at the bottom. That's the gig. I don't see any way that they can keep him, because how do you run that back with the fan base? How do you run that back with the assistant coaches who are also under contract? You can't fire all of them. You can't just excise the whole staff, and why would you for this guy, right? What are you going to do? Oh, come buy season tickets because Urban's back. Like, they bought the name, not the coaching ability, and they're reaping the benefits. And the benefits are lousy at this point because they got what they paid for. And Sarah Spain came out on TV this week and said, I told you so. I could have let you know. You could have known. Everywhere this guy has ever been, he has not taken responsibility. And he's left before the scandals caught up to him. And so why would it be any different? And she's right. She earns her victory lap on this one. Like, it's not like you couldn't have known this was coming with Urban Meyer. Everybody should have known this was coming if you've paid attention. It's always somebody else's fault, and he skates before it gets really bad. And he's going to do that to the tune of several $1 million, and that's the reality.
It is what
ugly.
it is.
Yeah, it's ugly.
Khan's going to just have to eat it and pay a shitload of money to get out of this problem.
Yeah.
And he can afford it. He's got the money. He can afford it.
Oh, it's not going to impact his bottom line at all. It's just terribly embarrassing.
But they got to do it.
Yeah,
because I'll tell you what, this is still an attractive job because of Trevor Lawrence. They can still get somebody good.
And the roster's not terrible. Like, you need offensive line help. You have some defensive playmakers. You don't have a ton, but you have some. You have young players that we like. You got a solid running back, which, look, you can get a solid running back anywhere. You really, you need probably another. We need to get Chark back healthy. You need to get another weapon at tight end, but you've got your quarterback, which is always attractive, and you are not without cap space, and you are not without draft picks.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So compare that to a situation like Chicago, where you have a quarterback, but you don't have a ton of draft picks, and your cap space looks really bad. You don't have a core. You have more issues than you can solve with the resources you have. Jacksonville's not like that. Like, you could go down there and win quickly.
Jacksonville's got the number 2 overall pick. Chicago doesn't pick till the second round because their first round pick which is also a top 5 pick, is with the Giants. So, I mean, if I had to weigh both options, as much as I love Justin Fields,
no, you're gonna win.
Taking Jacksonville.
You're gonna win more quickly in Jacksonville because of the base they have, and the fact that they still have a ton of resources and an owner that's willing to spend. Like, they had the most money in free agency going into last year and all the draft picks. So you didn't spend it all. Like, they need some help on the offensive line, but you can do that in one season, and the turnaround could be really marked if you get someone in there that understands how to develop an NFL quarterback, and Trevor starts playing like he showed flashes of for the first 6 weeks, even when things were falling down around his ears. Look, in the last month, he has looked horrendous. He's been running for his life, and he has looked terrible. But in the first 6-7 games, if you go back, he made at least 2 throws a game that you went, oh, okay.
Yeah, he looked good. And I still believe somebody that good in college, it's hard to imagine him being a bust, but he just needs the right coach to make it not happen, to put it a better way.
Yeah.
3 down, number 2. Oh, Raiders.
This is so stupid.
Raiders.
Like, this rarely works out, folks. There are examples, and I'm sure they will show up in our YouTube comments about, hey, let's go disrespect the other team's insert thing here. Logo, mascot, marker on the field, fans, time-honored tradition, whatever it is. We will go thumb our nose publicly at the hostile house we're in, and
before the game.
And that will be something that fires us up enough that we will trounce what is, a very capable football team in the Chiefs, who, like, since their defense turned around, we need to talk about this. In the last 5 weeks, they have basically allowed single-digit points. There was 1 week they allowed double-digit points. Like, they have got it figured out. Second half Spags is God at this point. Like, they took a very troubled team and solved their issues. They imported Melvin Ingram. They put Chris Jones back in the middle, and wham, they're basically shutting people down. So the Raiders, who've been up and down, and we've talked at length about that, we don't need to go into that, decide to go out and hop on the Chiefs logo at Arrowhead. And then they got their faces pushed in. There is no other way to say this. Like, they went to a division rival. I know they thought it was whatever, a good idea, cute, inspirational. They went out from the jump and got mashed.
No other way to put it. And that's after they lost the first time around, by the way, when they played against each other. What was it, like a month ago? They lost last time 41-14. You just lost by almost 30 to a team, and you go out and dance on their logo and have a little team meeting on their logo pregame? Are you insane?
Well, you're not well informed, let's put it that way, in terms of how this ends up historically. And Devontae Adams said the same thing about the little Robert Quinn did the discount double check belt celebration.
Oh, yeah, don't do it. Don't do it.
No, and honest to God, I watched this game with my kid, right? My oldest son is 10 years old. He has started to take an interest in football, and he came down and he was like, "Oh, it's Packers week." Like, oh, he gets it. He understands. And the Bears had a pretty good first half, like better than you would expect on the road against one of the better teams in the NFL. And he said, "Why is Aaron Rodgers smiling?" right about halftime. And I was like,
Oh no.
because he knows, right? Because he knows he's going to eat them, right? He always eats them, and he knows that he is going to bury them, and he's just smiling because he knows it's going to come to pass. And he did, and it did, and it's the same thing with the Chiefs. Like, if you add up the Chiefs' 2 scores from the games of the Raiders this year, they beat him like 89-14 or something. I mean, it's ridiculous.
It's. I mean, this game was literally the worst margin of victory, or most margin of victory in the history of this rivalry, and they've been playing against each other since
a long time.
What, Woodstock? Like, is that how long it's been?
Time. Yeah.
And this is the worst.
Yeah, it is. I just don't think it's a great idea. And the Raiders, as much as I hope they could sustain second half success, at this point don't look able to do that. And this was another game that we had in our watch list from last week, and we said this is really going to determine, like, if the Raiders can't win this game against Kansas City, that's pretty much them throwing up the white flag in the AFC West, and they're just going to have to sort of take whatever they get. Their destiny goes out of their hands after this point. Kansas City did this emphatically. They said, no, we got it, guys. Our division, it's cool. Like, start your vacation planning. This is, we've got it. We're going to go on and play some football. The whole bouncing on the logo thing is sort of a counterpoint. We started off with it, but no, the Chiefs are dialed in. The Raiders are losing their way. I understand they've been through a lot. We didn't think they would hold together as long as they did. The wheels have started to come off. Are they going to win any games down the stretch? They probably will. They'll probably pick up a couple games down the stretch. Does it really matter? It doesn't at this point.
I mean, they play, let's see, in the last month, who do they got? Browns, Broncos, Colts, oh, Jesus, they might not win.
They might not.
I don't know.
They might not with that slate. They might pick off one of those games, but that's 4 good teams. So they're going to have to work for it, and we'll see what they have. And the coaches, of course, will get film on the guys that want to be there and continue to play, and those that don't. But they might not pick up a victory out of those 4. That's rough. I hadn't looked at the opposing slate, obviously.
By the way, speaking of guys that want to play, shout out to Divine Diablo, who had a great, presser kind of talking about this game and calling out the defense, which, by the way, he's looked really good at linebacker. They got something there with Divine Diablo.
Our buddy Sanjeet said he was going to play this week, and I sent you that tweet. I was like, dude, like, something to watch on the Raiders side. Like, Divine Diablo's back. Like, this is a guy we really liked, and I'm with you. I think they've got a piece that can work for them.
Yeah, I mean, there's not many bright spots I could take away from the Raiders for this game other than Hunter Renfrow and Divine Diablo, but I'm going to cling to those as much as I can because everything else kind of sucked.
It was rough.
It was rough. 3 down, number 3. Bottom of the barrel in the NFL is as bleak as it's ever been. Again, you look at teams that are at the top of the draft order, or on paper at the top of the draft order. There's a lot of trades involved here, but Texans, Jags, Jets, and Lions are usually the foursome of teams that people list when they say who's the worst team in the NFL. They combined this week for 32 total points, which I think the Chiefs might have gotten by themselves in just one half against the Raiders. I'll have to double check that. But, I mean, averaging 8 points a game across these 4 teams. If you're a fan of a team like a Seattle or, a Philly where you're out of the playoffs right now and you're like, we suck. No, you don't understand suck unless you're a fan of one of those teams. Because that is a different level of, oh my God, we have work to do. If you're averaging between 4 teams 8 points a game, that's nuts.
Yeah, the Bears are bad. Like, the Bears are a demonstrably bad football team. They're a bad football organization right now.
They ain't that.
They're averaging twice that per game, right? They're averaging 16 plus points a game for the season, which is awful. Let's be fair. That is a terrible mark in the NFL and will win you very few games. It's double that. Like, it is legitimately 100% more points than these teams scored. By the way, did you see the stat that was floating around? I was pretty sure that Bill Zimmerman put it up this week that Matt Nagy's passing offense is averaging, 178 yards a game.
How it's not even as much as like the 1948 Bears or something like that.
The Sid Luckman Bears averaged 175. So, Matt Nagy's offense is 20 yards behind the 1940s, 20 yards a game behind the 1940s. Yeah. Anyways, no, Texans, Jags, Jets, Lions. It'll get better. We just talked about the Jags. That could be a very quick turn if they change the culture, get a new coach, and bring in some offensive line help. Like, their fortunes could turn very quickly. The Lions, I think, I know this is hard for Lions fans to hear, are on the right path, right? They need a quarterback and they need some more pieces, but we knew it was a multi-year rebuild. They're playing for Dan Campbell, even though they are one win and one tied. Like, they are playing for Dan Campbell, and honestly, their front office structure looks pretty good. Their draft was really strong. If they have another one of those, like, fortunes will start to turn. It'll really be the season after where they're competing, but the arrow's going in the right direction. The Jets, ton of talent. We believe in Robert Saleh. We think he's good. Zach Wilson has a lot of work to do. They're going to have to figure that out, but there's still hope in Jetsville. Texans? The Texans.
No hope.
Let's just move on. Let's just Texans move on. It's just Texans.
The Texans are their own
just Texans.
thing. And we'll probably do a podcast dedicated to how to. I'm not even going to say fix.
You know what
how
it
to make
reminds
them
me
somewhat
of?
respectable.
So Cristobal goes from University of Oregon to the University of Miami as the head coach, Mario Cristobal, and they're like, "Why would you do this? Like, Miami has so many more issues, and you had a good thing going at Oregon." And he goes, "It's a Canes thing. You just wouldn't understand." I think we need to kind of port that and be like, "Look, it's a Texans thing. You just wouldn't understand."
They're in their own
alternate
dimension.
You could just say Texans, and that covers it. It's like that sticky tape thing on the side of the leaky vat, right? Why is this? Texans.
At least Jets fans get to look at Zach Wilson BYU highlights and be like, one day, Texans fans got nothing.
But I mean,
and I say that as a Texans fan, we got nothing.
Right, but I mean, Jets got Michael Carter, they got Elijah Moore, they got Vera Tucker, they got things to look at, and they're going to have more things to look at because Jets have picks coming up. So, it's going to be fun for those. 3 out of those 4 teams, arrow kind of pointing up, or could be, depending on what happens with Urban Meyer. Texans are Texans.
3 interesting, number 1, speaking of the beloved Bears, by the way.
This is a great section this week. All 3 of these things are, intensely interesting.
Legitimately interesting. Not just we need to find a way to talk about this. Let's find an interesting angle. No, this is just a one-off fucking interesting stat comparison. So Justin Fields versus Mac Jones. And I want to preface this by saying this is not anti-Mac Jones in any way. Mac Jones is a very good young quarterback, especially when he is kept clean in the pocket because he's accurate. He's a good decision maker. You and I both love what he's done with New England. But that being said, when we're talking about quarterbacks from clean pockets, Mac Jones is good. Justin Fields has arguably been just as good, if not better. But the problem is he doesn't really get the same number of clean pockets per game, so we don't really get to see it.
Yeah, so Justin Fields, when he's kept clean, which if you're a Bears fan, is an infinitesimally small percentage of the time because the offensive line has been inconsistent at best, terrible at worst. So we've got 4 different stats here for both quarterbacks. Average depth of target, ADOT. Big time throw percentage. This is a PFF stat that talks about the likelihood of a throw being a throw that makes a difference, whether it be for yardage, changing the scene of the game. We've got adjusted completion percentage, and then we've got time to throw, which is literally from the snap, how long it takes the ball to get out of the quarterback's hands. So this is, again, when both quarterbacks are kept clean. And we'll start with Fields. ADOT, 9.2, depth of target. That's good. That's
awesome.
That is a fine number for any quarterback in the NFL. Big time throw percentage, 6.4%. Adjusted completion percentage, 68%. Very solid percentage. And time to throw is 2.62 seconds, which for those of you scoring at home, one of the knocks on Justin Fields was he tended to hold the ball too long because he is a very accurate deep ball thrower, and he looks to push the ball down the field. That is something he's going to do more often than other quarterbacks. Mac Jones, also when kept clean, average depth of target, 7.2, 2 yards less than Justin Fields. Big time throw percentage, 4.6, 2 percentage points lower than Justin Fields. 79% adjusted completion percentage. Now, this is 11 points higher than Fields. This is Mac Jones being a very accurate passer, which is, as we said before the draft, one of his hallmarks. And then time to throw is 2.36, so he also gets the ball out more quickly on these shorter throws. He makes quick, accurate decisions, and he is very good at that. That was one of the things that we said, look, Mac is as good at this as, we think he's better than Tua, and this is one of Tua's hallmarks, is quick, accurate decisions on shorter throws. So when you keep Justin Fields clean, his stats look really good, better than the best rookie quarterback in the class, Mac Jones. Issue is Fields is pressured on roughly 45% of his dropbacks. 1 out of every 2, Justin Fields has pressure in his face. Mac Jones is pressured on 28%.
Give or take 1 every 4.
Yeah, a lot less.
It's about half. It's about half.
Yeah. So it's not that Fields needs to be a better quarterback. It's that Fields needs more time to do what he does. And we've said this consistently, certainly on Bears Over Beers, that, look, if you give any quarterback, and I mean any quarterback, Tom Brady, Aaron, anybody, less than 2 seconds to operate in the pocket before somebody's influencing their throw or moving them off their spot, they're going to look terrible. And they're going to be bitching out their offensive line. Like, Tom Brady is going to be taking those guys to task, and they're going to go to war for him because he's going to be like, guys, I need 2.5 seconds. Give me 2.5 seconds, not 2. So if Justin Fields gets 2.5 seconds, he's going to start tearing people up commensurately. If he doesn't, he's going to continue to run for his life and look like he has for more than half of the season in Chicago. So want to give credit where credit is due. The whole segment there was built off a tweet by a guy named Future is Fields on Twitter. Made that comparison. We thought it was really interesting. Brought that onto the show. So thanks to Future is Fields. And on to 3 interesting number 2.
Yes, the Falcons. One of the weirdest teams in the NFL this year because they're not good, but they're also not bad. They are the picture of average. And actually, if I look at the draft order right now, they're sitting at 9, so they're like kind of in that upper echelon of like slightly below average, but clearly not terrible teams. They're not on the same level of the Giants, the Jets, the Texans, yada, yada, yada. Here's what's interesting about the Falcons. They're 0-5 against current playoff teams with a negative 127 point differential. A significant chunk of that's from Dallas, by the way. They're 6-2 against everyone else with a plus 15 differential. So they beat who they're supposed to beat, barely, but they do it. But when they go against like a really good team, they get annihilated. And I think that is honestly, and this is going to sound weird, best case scenario they could have hoped for in the first year of Arthur Smith, with no Calvin Ridley, with your best offensive player not being Matt Ryan, being probably Cordarrelle Patterson. Your offensive line is inconsistent at best. Your defense is inconsistent at best. And you're still 6-2 against non-playoff teams. Like, you're still firmly in the middle of the league. That, at least to me, they're not a good team, but they're not bad. And that is a good sign for Arthur Smith at least to me, as a head coaching prospect.
Yeah, we talked about this. He is definitely getting more out of anybody, more out of Cordell Patterson than anybody has. Like,
Ever.
And a lot of people, like 4 teams have had that guy now, and they've all sort of had different things. And Arthur Smith went to school on all of them and went, what if I just threw them all in the same pot and stirred? And then added a little pixie dust, and now he's got what he's got in Cordell Patterson. But this is the very definition. We talked about this a week or two ago about good teams, good bad teams, bad good teams, and bad teams. Like, this is the definition of a good bad team. This is a team that wins when it should, but when it goes up against anybody real, forget about it. It's like tissue paper. They're not holding up at all. They're going to get wiped off the field by a team that they are outclassed by. It's going to be very obvious. Again, they are winning the close games. Credit to them for that. And that is a best case scenario for an early stage coach getting his roster reformed and having them start to understand how to play under his system. They should be winning those close games. Again, those are their should win games. But yeah, when they go up against playoff teams, they're 0 for 5, 130 points off the pace. Like, that's not great. That is a good bad team. They look good against teams they should beat, and against teams they shouldn't beat, forget about it. Just bet the over, bet them not to cover, like, whatever. That's the gig. So Falcons are a real dichotomy, right? They're pretty good against some teams. You get them against a real team, and this has been one of the things about other teams in the league. I think of the Bears most notably. Again, like, everybody's like, oh, the Bears are terrible, and then they play the Lions and they go, oh, maybe they're not that bad, because they whoop the crap out of the Lions and have for the last 5 years.
There's levels to this. Yes,
right.
Yes.
But then they go play a team like the Packers, and they get blown out by twice as much. Like, the score gets doubled on them. They basically get boat raced, and it's like, oh yeah, oh well, they're not going to compete with that. And it's like, no, they're not. And that is, in the Falcons' case, at least they're winning the games they should. But boy, when they get up against elite competition, you start to see the cracks, and you see how far they have to go.
Honestly, like, if you told a Falcons fan back in August, hey, you're 6-7, in week 14, they'd be like, okay, cool.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong
I'm
at
good
all.
with that.
Oh.
Number 3. This has also been an interesting discussion that's kind of taken place this last week. Micah Parsons probably locked up Defensive Rookie of the Year at this point. I haven't checked the odds on Caesars, but I'd be willing to bet it's like minus 500 or something like that. Like, something insane. He's going to win Defensive Rookie of the Year. The question is, will he also win Defensive Player of the Year? Because his numbers are definitely in that territory.
Yeah, this is the question. Defensive Rookie of the Year, I think, has been somewhat clear for about the last 3 weeks. Like, people have been coming around to the idea that Micah Parsons can do whatever he wants to on a football field, and that Dallas is letting him, and he's succeeding in every role they put him in. He's starting to stack up numbers, and whether you like it or not, numbers represent voting for awards. Doesn't matter if it's Pro Bowl, doesn't matter if it's All Pro, doesn't matter if it's Hall of Fame, right? They talk about numbers. Number of times they were selected to an All-Star team, number of times they went to the Super Bowl, number of times they were the best player at their position. Let's talk about some numbers, because these are eye-opening. And tweet credit goes to Reddit Cowboy Status. Parsons in 13 games this year. 12 sacks, 75 tackles, 17 tackles for loss, and 27 QB hits. Easily enough to win him Rookie of the Year. And he's been exceptional in coverage. He has showed range down the seam to both sidelines, outside the numbers, that is atypical of the position he plays. Very
And
few
certainly
guys.
not what he showed in college, by the way. Like, he's gotten better in coverage since he got in the league.
He is more fluid in coverage than what we saw at Penn State. And again, this is a kind of Justin Herbert at Oregon situation where a guy has more talent than the system he's in allows him to show, or he's just not used in those ways. So those numbers I mentioned for Parsons in 13 games. Now, a guy named Khalil Mack that some NFL fans are familiar with won Defensive Player of the Year pretty recently, 2016. His numbers in 16 games that year are as follows: 11 sacks, 73 tackles, 14 tackles for loss, and 26 QB hits. All numbers under what Parsons has done in 13 games this year. He has 4 more left with the 17-game season. So,
Yikes.
1 less sack, 2 less tackles, 3 less TFLs, and 1 less QB hit earned Khalil Mack Defensive Player of the Year not that long ago. Parsons has 4 more games. He's healthy. He's playing at a high level in a defense that is showcasing all of his skills. Is he going to win Defensive Rookie of the Year? Almost certainly. Should he win Defensive Player of the Year? Look, he's got some stiff competition in Myles Garrett.
And TJ Watt.
TJ Watt as well, but TJ Watt's team is not doing as well, and typically for individual awards, it's the best players on better teams. Very rarely is the top guy the best guy on a bad team, and the Steelers are not a great team right now. So that's going to hurt TJ Watt, whether that's fair or not. It's a fact. Myles Garrett, same thing. Browns are a little above 500. We'll see how they do in the last month here. They could surge. But Garrett has been dominant. And he's got name recognition, which also helps in these awards. But if you stack up pure numbers and impact, like Micah Parsons has a legitimate shot to be Defensive Player of the Year in the same year he's Defensive Rookie of the Year. And that is astounding stuff.
Who's the last person to do that? LT, maybe?
I don't know. I was going to look it up before the show, and I ran out of time. I honestly don't know the answer. I do believe it's happened before, but I don't know the answer to who. So I'm sure it'll show in the comments.
If anybody did it, it's LT. But
yeah,
I
it's
honestly
somebody
can't
like
remember.
LT for sure.
Yeah.
But let's just say how ridiculous that is. That
It's
we're
insane.
like, well, maybe it's LT if anybody. Like having seen Lawrence Taylor play like in person as a young football fan, oh God, if that's all you can come up with for a comparison, Micah Parsons is going to wreck for a long time. Like Lawrence Taylor is one of the most dominant defensive players I have ever seen. And I saw prime Bruce Smith, prime Lawrence Taylor. Like I've seen a great many defensive players. If those are the guys that are coming to mind after half a season as a rookie.
Yeah, let's not mince words here. Kind of a jacked off season because of COVID and everything like that. Like, and he hasn't even been playing with some of the other best edge rushers on the team. He's been like the main threat in several games because Lawrence has been out, Gregory's been out. Like this isn't even full power Micah Parsons.
This is not Super Saiyan Micah Parsons is what you're saying?
No, yeah, this is like Goku still with his tail. You know, it's insane. It's insane. Let's get to Bootleg Shot of the Week, where this was a result that I honestly didn't even expect. I kind of hoped for it, but I didn't expect it. Justin Herbert, the first quarterback to take home the Bootleg Shot of the Week, running down Jesse Bates on a fumble return, making a form tackle, running like a cracked out gazelle on the Serengeti. 6'6" quarterback, by the way. He's 6'6", not 6'5".
Yeah, not 6'5". Be
Not
very
6'5".
clear about that. So cheers to Justin Herbert. I have straight up JMO this week. I did put it on ice, so it looks like a lot more than it is. Oh,
Cazadores,
Very
Reposado.
nice. No, there was an ice cube in here, but that was 2 hours ago. So now it's JMO and water apparently, which is fine for me. But I think it's the novelty. Justin Herbert, a quarterback, winning Bootleg Shot of the Week.
Yeah, so I'm toasting this hit, and I'm also toasting that throw to Jalen Guyton that he made that was like 1 billion yards this week, because holy fuck.
That was so
insane.
cool. It didn't even fit on the next gen stats chart. It just shows it leaving. It doesn't show it coming down because it doesn't go that far.
Did you see DJ's reaction, his live reaction to it in the booth?
And I tweeted it out and I said, totally justified. Like, and you know what's funny? Did you see this morning a fan came back at him and was like, well, actually, and DJ's reaction was,
okay.
God bless Twitter. Like, I said it was the best throw I'd ever seen. You might have seen a different throw that you think is better. Like, that's okay, but literally that is the best throw I've ever seen. So,
yeah,
you know, good on you for telling me it's not. Like, whatever. But yeah, Herbert is a complete alien. The one thing is, from the TV angle, it was an amazing throw no matter which way you look at it. From the TV angle, it looks like he has a second right before he gets hit to set and really throw.
He did not have time at all.
From the all 22, he like sets and chucks it and gets annihilated. Like, it's like, he's like, ha, ha, whack. And he just gets absolutely blasted. And the ball goes 65 yards to Guyton over 2 defenders who are like, no, come on, not us. We don't want to be on this highlight. Like, that, he's one of one right now. There's nobody that can make that
Those
throw.
safeties absolutely did not believe the ball could physically go that far.
They're like, no, we're running full speed. We're within a step. What is this? You can't do this. So, anyways, Justin Herbert, for all your amazing traits, you deserve this.
Oh, I love you, Cazadores.
I love the water of my people.
I'm running low, though. I might only have...
You are.
I might only get through the regular season with this.
I am not running low at Jameson's because one of the holiday traditions for us is to have Jameson's around the house, because you drink a little bit while you're cooking, or you toast when you're making the turkey or whatever. So as I've grown into adulthood, I've always made sure, oh yeah, hey, by the way, it's like 2 weeks till Christmas. I have to go get a bottle. Well, my wife did it for me this year, and she got the big bottle. Like,
the gallon of Jameson. Yeah,
it doesn't have the handle in it. It's the one below that size. But like, literally, I always buy, just regular fifths, like not huge bottles. She comes home, she's like, I got you Jameson's with 2 hands, and I was like, oh, okay. So
that's just that's a morning cordial in Belfast.
Yeah, true. All right, and the good thing about shot of the week, yeah, we have a full slate. Like, some weeks we kind of scrape by with 3 or 4 and like, it was good, or maybe it was like this week it was like we had like 8 nominees and we're like, these are the top 4, like, or 5. Like, we picked
we had to cut down this week. Yeah.
All right, you kept mine in, which is good.
Yes, I did, because you specifically requested it and I loved it too. But number 1 though is Bernard McKinney on a great run fit on Austin Eckler. It looks better from the top angle, where you can really see just like how his momentum immediately stopped when he met Bernard McKinney in the hole. But I remember when I watched this live, because I was watching this game, and I like right away DM'd you. It was like, Bernard McKinney, run fit, hit Eckler, that's going in.
This was the earliest bootleg shot of the week DM I've gotten in some time. It was like not even a quarter into the morning games. I get this, like, this is it. And I was like, okay.
You sent me this one. This was Derek Carr getting blasted off the Chiefs logo by Alex Okafor, who kind of ran himself at a pretty deep angle, and then Carr was kind of like, trying to find an escape lane and run towards the line of scrimmage, and Okafor just came from behind him and wrecked him, like absolutely wrecked him from behind.
90 degrees and just cleaned his house. Decleater took him right off his feet. And the funny thing is, it was right on the logo. Like, he was running across the logo, and the half step he gets off the logo, Okafor just cleans him off his feet. It's a blast.
Nominee number 3, Matt Milano, show favorite. Actually, 3 and 4 are both kind of similar, so I'll kind of do them at the same time, because they're both hang zone defenders waiting for a shallow cross to come right to them. and they both just completely light up their receiver. Number one is Matt Milano on Chris Godwin on the shallow cross at about a 5-yard depth, and he's just watching and waiting, and Godwin gets it, and Milano immediately goes into his rib cage. Nothing dirty, anything like that, but Godwin got up quick, but I can tell he's like, ooh, that one's gonna stick. And then Denzel Ward, even more vicious in my opinion, on Devonta Freeman, kind of doing a leak shallow, and just getting completely hung out to dry, and Ward closed on it. Again, another decleater, fantastic hit. Also legal, shoulder to shoulder. I checked. I went frame by frame, I promise. But man, just a lot of vicious hits this week. We probably had 8 or 9 options and cut it down to 4, and it was tough to do.
And we gotta say this. It's not an official one you can vote on, but hey, write-ins, whatever. You do you. The shot that Minkah Fitzpatrick put on in the end zone in Thursday Night Football that got a flag.
It should not have been flagged. That was legal.
So if you want to write this one in, you go ahead, because we're going to say, we have always said, if it's flagged or if somebody got injured, we're not putting it in. The official, right after they called this, Minkah went up and was like, hey, like after everything had been died down and the penalty had been assessed, he went up to the official and was like, what exactly is it you want me to do? I want you to tell me, because like, I think that was legal. And the official went like this and backed up, like, and called the next play. Like, if you look at this shot, Minkah hits the receiver in the end zone, who was KJ Osborne, like exactly as the NFL says they want him to hit. He comes in, he hits him under the shoulder with largely his shoulder. Yes, his helmet glances off, but he is not leading with the crown, and he does not deliver any force with his helmet. He literally puts his shoulder under Osborne's shoulder and levels him. So it's not an official choice because it got a flag, but if you want to write it in, you go ahead and do that.
You're perfectly allowed to.
Because
I'll put it as like an option 5.
Yeah, he mashed Osborne in a completely legal hit, and he got flagged for it. He shouldn't have. That is the hit that the NFL says they want. The bottom line is it looked like a complete demolition. And they just went, it's too much force. We just can't let that go.
I guarantee you he heard the sound and was like, well, that just has to be illegal.
Right. Something had to be wrong there. But it wasn't. That was, yeah. So our protest here at Bootleg is free Minkah.
Let's get to the Week 15 watch list. First game up. I don't remember the last time we had a Thursday game on the watch list, but we got one this week. KC at the Chargers. I was really thinking about going to this game, but I just couldn't. I couldn't find a good, Airbnb in time, because honestly, who wants to like drive out to LA and go to a game and then drive back home? Like, for where I live, that's a pain in the ass. So I was like, either I stay in LA or I don't go. Couldn't find a good place to stay, so I'm not going to go in person. But I really wanted to, because seeing Justin Herbert versus Pat Mahomes in person, and Herbert, by the way, 3-1 against the Chiefs in his career, and his only loss, I think, was his first ever start, where he went in, where Tyrod had like his lungs collapsed by the doctor, and I think that's his only loss against the Chiefs, was like when he got
his
20 minutes notice.
Start, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm kind of glad that you can't go, because I was like, if he goes, I'm going to have to fly down and go.
It's a hell of a game. It's a hell of a game.
We talked about it preseason. Like, when we were circling games preseason, we were like, late season, Chiefs, Chargers. We expected both of these teams to be good. We were like, it's by your house. We were like, this might be a like December game we have to go to. Like, it was one of our games on the list at the very beginning of the year when we were working that out preseason. So
2-1, not 3-1. Excuse me. They haven't played 4 games yet. But if he wins this one, he'll be 3-1. Worst case, he'll be 50-50 against the Chiefs, which not a whole lot of quarterbacks can say in the Pat Mahomes era. That's a pretty tough ask. Game number 2, Indy versus the Patriots. We got the Colts hosting New England. Always a fascinating rivalry because neither program likes each other very much. And even though we got some new faces there with Carson Wentz and Mac Jones, I still feel like the hatred runs a little bit deeper than people realize. Like, these are two franchises that have no love lost. Every time they play each other, it's very physical, very, very physical. And you've got two quarterbacks that I think it's fair to say they're exceeding expectations this year, with Mac Jones being a rookie and Carson Wentz being a reclamation project for Frank Reich that so far is going pretty well. You know, both defenses, I think, are, fast and furious. Should be fun. Seeing Jonathan Taylor go up against Christian Barmore should be at least entertaining. And then game number 3, we got New Orleans at Tampa Bay. There's something about the Saints that has just really given Tom Brady trouble since he's gone down to Tampa Bay. It's kind of like his new Dolphins, where inexplicably they'll just rip wins off of him even when they have no business competing. They just do. They've been a thorn in Tom Brady's side as a Buccaneer. So I'm watching just for that reason, because for whatever reason, this defense eats him alive.
Yeah, that feels like the reason I put it on the list was like, there's just something about Saints Bucs. It's a Canes thing, It's a Saints Bucs thing. It's just sometimes you look at that game and you go, shouldn't be good, shouldn't be close. Like, whoever, when it was Drew Brees, should be blowing him off the map. Bucs should play him tough. Now it's Tom Brady. Oh, they should roll. Like, the Saints are undermanned. Like, I wouldn't bet on it. Patriots Colts is interesting just from two teams that are really coming with a classic late season approach, right? We're going to try and run, and it'll be fascinating to see who bends first. Now, this is not outside. Key thing, it's in Indy, right? So inside, but like two teams with a very classic, hard-hitting December kind of playoff approach. We are going to run first. We're going to play very physical defense on both sides of the ball. Like, this is going to be a war. This is going to be some hard hitting really early, and then who can adjust from whatever gets taken away. Like, I would expect both run games to get stymied somewhat early because both coaches are very competent in doing that. And whoever makes that adjustment, and look, Belichick is a master of adjustments, but he's on the road and he's going to have to adapt again to what is a dangerous and very good team. Chiefs Chargers is just going to be like, I hope it's just going to be awesome. I hope it's just going to be two teams. I'm really glad it's not the earlier season version of the Chiefs, right? Which was a distinctly flawed team.
I wanted this version of the Chiefs. I want like 60-yard bombs every other possession. Like, I want defense optional. That's what I want here.
And Kansas City has reclaimed their spot in the division based on defense, which is fascinating. So can the Chargers show up like they did a couple of weeks ago with a defense that's equal to their, Herbert-led offense? Or is, which of the four units is going to fold here? Should be a classic contest. Going to be a great Thursday night game. I'm looking forward to all those games.
So before we get out of here, what do you got to plug for Bears over Bears? You just got through Packers week. You got about a month left of games. What do you got coming up?
Yeah, so a lot of Bears fans have checked out, and rightfully so. And we get that. So last week we came up with the absurd idea, and it got legs. It started as a joke. JB texted me and said, man, I really don't want to talk about the Packers very much. Like, this is not going to be a fun game. What are we going to do? What should we talk about? And I just snapped back, cheese. And he was like, a cheese draft? I'm in. And I was like, a cheese draft? All right, cool. I'll make a cheese draft.
Fuck it.
So we made a cheese draft. There were hard cheeses, there were soft cheeses, and then there was a flex category. We went full fantasy football. And the flex category had things like squeezed cheese and queso, which isn't really a cheese, and beer cheese dip, which is many cheeses. Like, we went full boat. You had to have 5 cheeses plus a flex. 2 hards, 2 softs, whatever the filler was, and then a flex. And I swear to God, I got 100 comments on Twitter about the cheese draft.
Can I ask a question? Did you allow cheese curds?
We didn't put cheese curds in it as an option, but I swear to God, the entire reason this very silly concept worked is because everybody has an opinion instantly, whether they know anything about football or not. Everybody knows something about cheese, and people were like, "It's criminal that you didn't put Gouda on the list." That is I'm not even gonna like bless this with my inference because you didn't have Gouda. Like, people got heated about cheese, so it was a silly idea that absolutely got legs. We did the cheese draft last week. We're gonna have to follow that up. We've got a great guest. We're going to bring Brad Spielberger from PFF on. He's an old friend of the show. He's been coming on for years. And we're going to start talking about GM candidates because Nagy is assumed gone. Like, everybody's pretty sure Nagy's gone. So the coaching candidate thing will come. We will talk about that. But the real crux move here is, do you keep Ryan Pace? And the narrative has changed in the last week. There was a lot of thought that Pace might be kept and promoted to dealing with the stadium and taken away from the football operations piece. There is some turn in that a promotion this week is not in consideration in the cards. It's either keeping him in his current role or not keeping him. And that is a distinct change. And if that's the case, the likelihood that Ryan Pace leaves with Nagy is much higher than if he has that out to go deal with the stadium in Arlington Heights. So we're going to start talking about GM candidates. Nobody better than Brad to do that.
I mean, the stadium in itself is one of the more interesting topics around the league to me, just because of everybody in the Chicago area has an opinion on it.
Yeah. It's like
people
cheese.
The people that are in the city are like, "Oh no, please don't make me go out there." And everybody in the suburbs is like, "Please, God, yes, don't make me go back to the city."
Yeah, and then the mayor's weighing in, and there's a whole
it's
thing
a shit show. It's a glorious shit show. I got a film room coming out on the Seahawks, specifically their offense and why it didn't work, and then why it suddenly started to work, and why even though the offense suddenly started to work, there still might need to be a blow up here. My goal is to preserve Russell Wilson being a Seahawk, but I understand if that's not possible. But it's kind of a film room about what the issues are, how they solved them, how they can continue to solve them going forward, and why, despite their perceived improvement, it still might require a pretty significant teardown here. But yeah, hell of a show, hell of a week of football. We got, if anything, to go by from the Week 15 watch list, an even better week of football coming up here in a couple days. Thank you all for watching and listening from all the different countries that you guys watch and listen from. I can't even list the amount of countries that we're in at this point because it truly is a global show, and we love all of you for supporting us and helping to make this possible. We will see you back here next Wednesday, hopefully recapping a great Week 15. And until then, later.
Take care.